My name is Bernice. I'm 57 years old, and right now I'm folding my clothes into this old suitcase while my son Marcus watches from the hallway. Through the crack in my bedroom door, I can see that satisfied smile spreading across his face. He thinks he's won. He thinks his tired old mother is finally admitting defeat and heading off to that nursing home he and his wife picked out for me. But Marcus has no idea where I'm really going. He doesn't know about the phone calls I've been making, the papers I've signed, or the new life I've been building in secret. What he's about to discover will change everything he thought he knew about his mother. Before I tell you this story, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Please hit that like button if you're ready to hear how one woman turned her greatest betrayal into her most powerful comeback. And don't forget to subscribe, because this journey is going to show you that it's never too late to reclaim your dignity. Trust me, you won't believe what happens next. Let me take you back 3 years to when everything still felt like it was going to work out perfectly. After my husband died when Marcus was just 10 years old, I raised that boy with everything I had. I worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3 during the holidays. Days I served coffee and sandwiches at Miller's Diner downtown, smiling through my exhaustion, as truckers and office workers complained about cold eggs or slow service. Nights I cleaned offices in the business district, pushing my cart from room to room, while the city slept, making sure every surface gleamed for the morning rush. I never minded the ache in my feet, or the way my hands cracked from constant washing. Every blister, every missed meal, every lonely evening was an investment in Marcus's future. When he graduated summa cum laude from law school, I sat in that auditorium with tears streaming down my face, knowing every sacrifice had been worth it. The boy who used to do homework at the diner counter while I worked had become a successful attorney with his own practice. Marcus married Sarah, a beautiful blonde woman with perfect teeth and a way of speaking that made everything sound like a gentle suggestion, even when it wasn't. They had 2 children, Emma, who was 8, and little David, who was 5. For a while, we'd meet for Sunday dinners at their house, and I'd watch my son carve the roast while his wife served vegetables from matching dishes. It felt like something from a magazine, this perfect life my sacrifices had built. Then 3 years ago, Marcus approached me with what seemed like the most wonderful offer. "Mom," he said, sitting across from me in my tiny kitchen. "Sarah and I have been talking. This old house is too much for you to maintain alone. Why don't you sell it and come live with us? The kids would love having their grandmother around, and we could all help take care of each other." I remember how my heart swelled with gratitude. Finally, after all those years of loneliness, I'd be part of a real family again. I'd get to see my grandchildren grow up, maybe help with homework the way Marcus used to do his at my kitchen table. The house had been feeling empty anyway, full of memories, but lacking the warmth of daily life. So I sold the little 2-bedroom house where I'd raised Marcus, the same house where I'd cried over unpaid bills, and celebrated his every achievement. With the money, I paid off Marcus's remaining student loans and contributed to the down payment on their larger home. Sarah suggested I could take the guest room upstairs, just until we figure out the best arrangement. That should have been my first warning, but I was too happy to notice. Those early months I threw myself into being helpful. I'd wake at 5:30 to start breakfast, getting Emma and David ready for school, while Marcus and Sarah prepared for their busy days. I'd pack lunches, tie shoes, and kiss little foreheads goodbye. Then I'd spend the day cleaning grocery shopping and planning dinner. When everyone came home, I'd have a hot meal waiting and homework help ready. But slowly things began to change. Sarah would rearrange items I'd organized, explaining that I didn't understand the system. She'd redo tasks I'd completed, suggesting I wasn't thorough enough. When I offered to redecorate my small room to feel more at home, she'd shake her head sadly and say the changes wouldn't fit with the overall aesthetic of the house. I told myself these were just adjustments, the natural growing pains of 3 adults learning to share space. After all, it was their house, their rules. I was grateful to be there, grateful to be needed. But late at night, lying in that guest bed that never quite felt like mine, I'd sometimes wonder when gratitude had started feeling so much like walking on eggshells. The first real argument came on a Tuesday morning in February. I decided to hang some of my own artwork, small watercolor paintings I'd done during those lonely evenings in my old house. Nothing dramatic, just gentle landscapes that reminded me of happier times. I thought they might brighten up the bland beige walls of my room and make the space feel more personal. Sarah found me standing on a stepladder, carefully positioning a painting of the lake where Marcus and I used to fish when he was little. "Bernice," she said, and her voice had that particular tone that made my stomach tighten. "We need to talk about this." "It's just a small painting," I said, stepping down from the ladder. "I thought it might make the room feel more welcoming." "But honey," Sarah said, and I hated how she'd started calling me honey in that condescending way. "The room has a very specific color palette. These paintings, they're lovely, but they just don't work with what we're trying to achieve here. The house has to flow, you understand. We can't have every room looking different." I looked around the room that was supposed to be mine, at the beige walls and cream curtains, at the generic furniture that could have belonged to anyone or no one. "But this is my space," I said quietly. "Of course it is," Sarah said quickly. "But it's also part of our home. We all have to make compromises." When Marcus came home that evening, I tried to explain how I was feeling. We were sitting in his study, a room filled with his law books and framed diplomas, reminders of everything I'd worked to give him. "I just want to feel like I belong here," I told him. But Marcus looked tired, stressed from a difficult case he was working. "Mom, I know this is an adjustment for everyone, but Sarah's been working really hard to make this house a home for our family. Can't you just try to work with her? She's under a lot of pressure too." That night was my 56th birthday. I'd been living with them for almost a year, and somehow I thought, maybe foolishly, that they'd remember. I woke up hoping for a small acknowledgement, maybe a card or a shared breakfast. Instead, I found a note on the kitchen counter. "Gone to David's soccer game. Dinner in fridge. Thanks, S." I spent my birthday alone, heating up leftover casserole and watching old movies on television. When they returned that evening, laughing and energetic from the game, no one mentioned the date. Marcus kissed my cheek and asked if I'd had a good day, but his eyes were already moving toward the pile of work he'd brought home. 2 weeks later, I was putting laundry away when I overheard Sarah on the phone in her bedroom. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, I was just passing by when her voice carried through the partially open door. "I'm telling you, Janet, it's becoming impossible," Sarah was saying. "She's here all the time, constantly underfoot. Yesterday she rearranged the spice cabinet, and I couldn't find anything. And the way she watches everything I do with the kids, like she's judging my parenting. I feel like a stranger in my own home." I stood frozen in the hallway, holding a stack of Marcus's folded shirts against my chest. "I know she means well," Sarah continued, "but there's a difference between helping and taking over. Marcus won't say anything because he feels guilty, but I'm at my breaking point. I need my space back." I backed away quietly, my heart pounding with a mixture of hurt and something that might have been relief. At least now I knew where I stood. The doubt I'd been carrying for months suddenly crystallized into certainty. I wasn't being oversensitive or ungrateful. I was genuinely unwanted. That evening I asked Marcus if we could talk privately. We walked out to the back porch where the early spring air was still crisp enough to make our breath visible. "I think I need to find my own place," I said without preamble. Marcus turned to look at me, surprise written across his features. "What, Mom? Why would you say that? This is your home now." "Is it?" I asked. "Because it doesn't feel like it. I feel like I'm a guest who's overstayed her welcome." "That's not true," Marcus said, but he couldn't quite meet my eyes. "Sarah's just stressed with work and the kids. We all need time to adjust." "It's been a year, Marcus. How much time do we need?" He was quiet for a long moment, staring out at the yard where his children's toys lay scattered across the grass. "Look, Mom, I know it's not perfect, but you don't have anywhere else to go. The house is sold. Your savings are tied up in our mortgage. Let's just give it more time." And there it was, spoken out loud. I didn't have anywhere else to go. I'd made myself dependent on my son's charity, and now I was trapped by my own good intentions. That night I lay awake, making the first tentative plans for what would become my escape. Spring turned into a tense summer, and the small conflicts became daily battles. Sarah instituted new house rules that seemed designed specifically to remind me of my place. I could only use the kitchen during certain hours when she wasn't cooking. The living room was off limits when she was entertaining friends. Even my interactions with Emma and David became monitored and restricted. The breaking point came during a seemingly innocent incident with little David. He'd fallen and scraped his knee while playing in the backyard, and I'd cleaned the wound and given him a Band-Aid with cartoon characters on it. To comfort him, I'd also given him 2 pieces of candy from the stash I kept in my room for special occasions. When Sarah discovered this, her reaction was volcanic. "How dare you undermine my authority?" she said, standing in my doorway with her hands on her hips. "I have specific rules about candy before dinner. David knows this, and you've completely disrespected those boundaries." "He was hurt," I said. "I was just trying to make him feel better." "That's not your job," Sarah snapped. "You're not his mother, I am. And if you can't respect my parenting decisions, then maybe you need to reconsider your role in this household." When Marcus came home and I explained what had happened, I expected support. Instead, he sided completely with his wife. "Mom, you need to respect Sarah's parenting rules. She's right, you can't just give the kids candy whenever you think they need it." "I've raised a child, Marcus," I said, my voice sharper than I'd intended. "I think I know how to comfort a hurt little boy." "That was different," Marcus said. "That was your child. These are our children, and Sarah and I make the decisions about how they're raised." The words hit me like a physical blow. That was different. As if everything I'd done to raise him, every sacrifice I'd made, was somehow lesser than what he and Sarah were doing. As if my experience as a mother was irrelevant in this new family structure. That night, I started researching in earnest. I looked up senior living communities, apartment rentals, job opportunities for women my age. I also began reading about elder law, about financial rights and protections. Something Sarah had said about my savings being tied up in their mortgage had started a small alarm bell ringing in the back of my mind. The more I investigated, the more concerned I became. When I'd contributed to their down payment, the money had gone directly into their account. When I'd paid off Marcus's student loans, I'd written the checks from my account to his creditors. I had no legal claim on their house, no documentation of my contributions. If they decided to force me out, I'd have very little recourse. 2 weeks later, while cleaning Marcus's study, I accidentally knocked over a stack of papers. As I was gathering them up, an email printout caught my eye. It was from Sarah to Marcus, sent the day before, and the subject line read, "Nursing home options." My hands trembled as I read it. Sarah had researched several facilities in the area, comparing costs and services. She'd even visited 2 of them and obtained brochures. At the bottom of the email she'd written, "The sooner we can convince her this is for her own good, the sooner we can get our lives back. The kids are asking why Grandma always looks so sad." I carefully placed the papers back exactly as I'd found them, but something fundamental had shifted inside me. They weren't just planning to ask me to leave. They were planning to institutionalize me, to convince me I was incapable of caring for myself. And they were discussing it behind my back, as if I were a problem to be solved, rather than a person with feelings and rights. That afternoon, I called a taxi and went to the office of Patricia Williams, an elder law attorney I'd found through my research. Patricia was about my age, with gray hair and kind eyes, and she listened to my story without judgment. "What you're describing could potentially be considered elder abuse," she said when I'd finished. "Financial exploitation, emotional manipulation, isolation from social connections. You have more options than you might think." For the first time in months, I felt a spark of hope. I wasn't powerless. I wasn't just a burden to be managed. I was a human being with rights, with resources, and with the ability to make choices about my own life. The family meeting happened on a Thursday evening in late August. Marcus had asked me to join him and Sarah in the living room after dinner, and there was something about his formal tone that told me this was serious. I sat on the edge of the couch while they took the chairs across from me, and I noticed they'd positioned themselves like a united front. "Mom," Marcus began, "we need to talk about your living situation here." My heart started racing, but I kept my expression neutral. "Okay." Sarah leaned forward, her voice taking on that fake, concerned tone I'd grown to despise. Bernice, we've all been under a lot of stress lately, and I think it's because this arrangement just isn't working for anyone. You seem unhappy here, and frankly, we're worried about you. Worried how? I asked. Well, Sarah glanced at Marcus, who nodded encouragingly. There have been some incidents. Last week you left the stove on after making tea. Yesterday you forgot to lock the front door when you went for your walk. Little things, but they add up. I stared at her, my mind racing. I distinctly remembered turning off the stove and checking the door lock. But as Sarah spoke, I began to doubt myself. Had I been more forgetful lately? Was my stress affecting my memory? We think, Marcus said gently, that you might be happier somewhere with more structured support, somewhere designed specifically for people your age where you can make friends and have activities planned for you. He reached into a folder beside his chair and pulled out several glossy brochures. We've looked at some really nice places. This one has a beautiful garden, and this one offers art classes every Tuesday. I picked up one of the brochures with shaking hands. Sunset Manor Senior Living Community. The pictures showed elderly people playing cards and tending flowers, all of them smiling with that same vacant contentment I'd seen in stock photos. This feels very sudden, I managed to say. It's not sudden, Mom. We've been thinking about this for months. We just wanted to research the best options before bringing it up. And what if I don't want to go? The question hung in the air for a long moment. Sarah and Marcus exchanged a look that told me they'd rehearsed this conversation. Mom, Marcus said finally, I think you know that living here isn't good for any of us. You're not happy, Sarah's not happy, and it's affecting the kids. They can feel the tension. Besides, Sarah added, you don't really have the resources to maintain an independent living situation. At least in a facility like this, you'd have security and care without the financial stress. There it was, the trap they'd helped me build for myself. By selling my house and contributing to theirs, by paying off Marcus's debts, I'd made myself financially dependent on their goodwill. And now they were using that dependence to force me into the exact situation they wanted. I need time to think about this, I said. Of course, Marcus said quickly. But Mom, these places have waiting lists. If we want to get you into one of the nicer facilities, we need to put your name down soon. He pulled out another paper, an application form that had already been partially filled out. My name, my birth date, my medical information. All that remained was my signature. You don't have to decide tonight, Sarah said, but maybe just sign the application. That way you'd be on the list while you're thinking it over. I looked down at the paper at my name written in Marcus's careful handwriting, and something inside me crystallized into cold fury. They'd already decided. This wasn't a conversation or a request. It was a notification that they'd found a way to get rid of me that would let them feel good about themselves. I'll think about it, I repeated and stood up. I'm going to go pack some things. I want to be ready in case I decide to visit one of these places. Relief flooded both their faces. That's a great idea, Mom, Marcus said. Take your time, pack whatever you need. As I walked toward the stairs, I heard Sarah whisper to Marcus, Thank God. I thought that was going to be much harder. I climbed those stairs with my back straight and my head high, even though inside I was crumbling. But as I reached my bedroom and closed the door behind me, the crumbling stopped, and something else took its place. Determination, anger, and a plan that had been months in the making. I pulled my old suitcase from the closet and began to pack, but not for Sunset Manor. Through my partially open door, I could see Marcus standing in the hallway, and when he caught sight of me, folding clothes into the suitcase, that satisfied smile spread across his face. Let him smile. Let him think he'd won. Because tomorrow morning, he was going to discover that his tired old mother had learned a few things about fighting back. Friday morning arrived gray and drizzly, matching the somber mood that had settled over the house. I'd finished packing the night before, and my suitcase sat by the bedroom door like a monument to defeat. At least that's what it looked like to Marcus when he passed by on his way to the shower. I was in the kitchen making coffee when he came downstairs, already dressed for work. He moved carefully around me, as if afraid that too much conversation might make me change my mind about leaving. "Do you need help with anything today?" he asked, pouring himself a cup of coffee. "No, thank you. I've arranged for transportation." He nodded relief, evident in his posture. "That's good. That's really good, Mom." Sarah appeared in her silk robe hair, perfectly styled even first thing in the morning. "Bernice, I just want you to know that this is really for the best. You'll be so much happier somewhere you can focus on yourself instead of worrying about all of us." I watched her butter a piece of toast and wondered how someone could sound so sincere while being so calculatingly cruel. "I'm sure you're right," I said. After breakfast, I called for a taxi. Marcus offered to drive me, but I declined, telling him I preferred to make the transition independently. What I didn't tell him was that I was afraid if I spent 30 minutes in a car with him, I might say things that would ruin everything I'd worked toward. The taxi arrived at 10:30. I carried my suitcase to the front door while Marcus and Sarah watched from the living room window. As I stepped outside, Marcus came after me. "Mom, wait," he said, and for a moment my heart leaped with the hope that he'd changed his mind. "I just want you to know that this doesn't mean we don't love you. This is about what's best for everyone." I turned to look at my son, this man I'd raised with everything I had, and I saw a stranger. "I know exactly what this is about, Marcus." The taxi driver helped me with my suitcase, and as we pulled away from the house, I looked back to see Marcus standing on the front porch. He wasn't waving. He wasn't looking sad. He was checking his phone, already moving on to the next item on his day's agenda. "Where to?" the driver asked. I gave him an address downtown, and he pulled into traffic. We weren't going to Sunset Manor. We weren't going to any nursing home. We were going to the office of Patricia Williams, attorney at law, where the final pieces of my plan were waiting to be put into place. Patricia was expecting me, and she had all the paperwork ready. Over the past 2 months, during secret visits while Marcus and Sarah thought I was grocery shopping or taking walks, we'd arranged everything. I'd opened a new bank account at a different bank and transferred the majority of my savings and my monthly Social Security payments. I'd found a beautiful one-bedroom apartment in a senior community that offered independence rather than institutionalization. I'd even applied for and been accepted to a part-time position as a peer counselor at the community center. Most importantly, I'd rewritten my will. Marcus had always been my primary beneficiary, inheriting everything I'd spent my life building. But that was when I thought my son would care for me the way I'd cared for him. Now my assets would go to organizations that actually helped elderly women in situations like mine. "Are you sure about this?" Patricia asked as I signed the final documents. "This is a big step." "I've never been more sure of anything in my life," I said. The apartment I'd rented was in Maple Heights, a community designed for active seniors who wanted independence with the option of additional services as needed. It had a small kitchen where I could cook my own meals, a living room where I could display my paintings, and a bedroom that would finally truly be mine. The moving truck I'd arranged was already at the storage unit where I'd been secretly moving my belongings for weeks. All those walks I'd taken, all those shopping trips, had been opportunities to rescue pieces of my life from the house where I'd felt so unwelcome. By 3 o'clock that afternoon, I was standing in my new living room, surrounded by boxes, but feeling more at home than I had in 3 years. I'd left a letter for Marcus with the apartment manager at their complex to be delivered after 5 o'clock. I wanted to be completely settled before he realized what had really happened. The letter was simple and direct. I explained that I'd found my own housing and employment, that I'd transferred my finances to protect my independence, and that I'd updated my legal documents to reflect my new circumstances. I included my new address and phone number, but I also made it clear that contact would be on my terms when and if I was ready. As the sun set on my first day of freedom, I sat in my new kitchen, drinking tea from my own cup, looking out at a small garden where other residents were tending tomato plants and flower beds. For the first time in years, I felt like myself again. Not Marcus's burden, not Sarah's problem, just Bernice, 57 years old, and finally ready to live the rest of her life on her own terms. My phone rang around 6:30. Marcus. I let it go to voicemail. He called 6 more times that evening. I didn't answer any of them. Saturday morning brought a pounding on my new door at 8 o'clock. Through the peephole, I could see Marcus standing in the hallway, his hair disheveled and his face flushed with anger and panic. He'd obviously driven straight over after receiving my letter. I opened the door, but left the security chain attached. Good morning, Marcus. Mom, what the hell is going on? The letter, this apartment. What are you doing? I'm living my life, the same thing you've been doing while deciding mine. This is crazy. You can't just disappear and move out without talking to us. We're your family. Are you? I asked. Because family doesn't usually research nursing homes behind each other's backs or forge documentation about forgotten stove burners. His face went white. You knew? I've known for weeks. Patricia, my attorney, helped me understand that what you and Sarah were doing could be considered elder abuse, financial exploitation, emotional manipulation, isolation. Should I continue? Marcus stepped backward as if I'd slapped him. Your attorney, Patricia Williams, elder law specialist, lovely woman about my age. She's been helping me understand my rights for the past 2 months. Mom, please let me in. Let me explain. Explain what? How you used my savings to pay your mortgage. How you convinced me to sell my house so I'd be financially dependent on you. How you and Sarah planned to have me declared incompetent so you could control my life. It wasn't like that, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. What was it like then? Marcus leaned against the doorframe, suddenly looking older than his 37 years. It was supposed to be easier. Having you live with us was supposed to be good for everyone. Easier for whom? Certainly not for me. Sarah thought, look, Mom, I know we made mistakes, but you can't just cut us out of your life. The kids keep asking where you are. Emma and David are welcome to visit me here anytime they'd like. But their visits will be because they want to see their grandmother, not because their parents need a free babysitter. I could see him processing the implications of what I was saying. No more built-in childcare. No more someone else taking responsibility for household tasks he didn't want to handle. No more financial cushion from my Social Security and pension payments. What about our family? He asked. What about it? I mean, we're still family. You're still my mother. Yes, I am. But being your mother doesn't mean accepting abuse. It doesn't mean sacrificing my dignity and independence so you and Sarah can feel better about yourselves. Through the window, I could see Sarah sitting in their car in the parking lot, arms crossed, looking annoyed rather than concerned. She'd probably expected this to be a quick trip to collect the confused old lady and bring her home where she belonged. Can I at least come in so we can talk about this properly? Marcus asked. No. When I'm ready to have a conversation with you, I'll let you know. Right now, I'm still too angry to have that conversation be productive. Mom, please. Marcus, I spent 3 years walking on eggshells in your house, trying to earn my right to exist in spaces I'd helped pay for. I'm not going to spend another minute of my life begging for basic respect from my own son. I closed the door gently but firmly. Through the wood, I could hear him standing there for several minutes before finally walking away. From my window, I watched him return to the car where Sarah waited. Even from a distance, I could see her mouth moving rapidly, probably asking why he hadn't just dragged me back with him. The phone calls started again that afternoon. Marcus, Sarah, even the children calling to ask when Grandma was coming home. The voicemails ranged from pleading to angry to confused. Marcus promised changes, Sarah offered compromises, but none of them addressed the fundamental issue. They still saw me as someone whose life was theirs to manage, rather than someone who deserved to make her own choices. By Monday, the calls had escalated to demands. Marcus threatened to contest my mental competency. Sarah suggested I was having some kind of breakdown. They contacted Patricia's office demanding to know what kind of legal trickery had been used to turn me against my family. Patricia handled them with professional courtesy and absolute firmness. Mrs. Henderson is legally competent to make her own financial and living arrangements, she told Marcus. If you believe otherwise, you're welcome to pursue legal remedies, but I should warn you that any attempt to challenge her competency without legitimate medical evidence could be considered harassment. That Tuesday, I started my new job at the senior center. 3 days a week, I worked with other women who'd found themselves in similar situations. Some had been financially abused by their children, others had been forced into unwanted living arrangements. Still others had simply been ignored and marginalized until they felt invisible. I discovered I was good at listening, good at helping other women see their options and find their strength. Every story I heard reminded me that what had happened to me wasn't unique or personal. It was part of a larger pattern of how society devalued older women, especially mothers who'd spent their lives giving everything to ungrateful families. 3 weeks after my move, Emma and David appeared at my door with Marcus. The children ran to hug me, full of questions about my new home and why I'd moved away. Marcus stood in the hallway looking uncomfortable. "Can we come in?" Emma asked. "Daddy said you have your own apartment now." I looked at Marcus over the children's heads. "Are you here as their father, bringing them to visit their grandmother? Or are you here to continue the argument we've been having?" "I just want them to see you," he said quietly. "They've been really confused and sad." I opened the door wide and let all 3 of them in. Emma and David explored the apartment with the curiosity of children, exclaiming over my paintings on the walls and the cookies I'd baked that morning. Marcus sat stiffly on my couch, looking around at the space I'd created for myself. "It's nice," he said finally. "Thank you." "Mom, I've been thinking about everything that happened. About the things Sarah and I did. I think maybe we were wrong about some things." I didn't respond immediately. I was learning to let silence do the work that words sometimes couldn't. "We miss you," he continued. "The house feels different without you there." "Different how?" "Quieter. Less like a home, more like just a place where we live." From the kitchen, I could hear Emma chattering to David about the pictures on my refrigerator. Normal grandmother sounds that I'd missed more than I'd realized. "Marcus," I said, "I'm not angry with you because you wanted me to move out. I'm angry because of how you did it. The lying, the manipulation, the way you made me feel like a burden instead of a person. I know. I handled it all wrong. Do you really understand what you did?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I think I convinced myself that what we were doing was for your own good, but really it was just easier for us. And that was wrong." It wasn't a complete acknowledgement, but it was a start. For the first time in months, I saw a glimpse of the son I'd raised, rather than the man who'd been so eager to get rid of me. 2 years have passed since I packed that suitcase and walked out of Marcus's house, and I'm sitting here in my sunlit living room, looking out at the garden, where I now grow my own tomatoes and herbs. The woman who folded clothes in defeat that morning feels like someone from another lifetime, though I can still remember exactly how trapped and hopeless she felt. My life now is fuller than it's been in decades. The work at the senior center expanded into a program I helped design called Second Chapter, where women over 50 learn about financial independence and legal rights. I speak at workshops, sometimes telling my story to other mothers who found themselves in situations similar to mine. The feedback is always the same. They had no idea they had options. They thought family loyalty meant accepting whatever treatment their children chose to give them. I've made friends here at Maple Heights, real friends who choose my company because they enjoy it, not because they need something from me. Margaret from down the hall and I take painting classes together. Dorothy and I have a weekly bridge game that's become the highlight of my week. These relationships feel clean in a way family relationships never did, free from the complicated debt of obligation and resentment that had poisoned my time with Marcus and Sarah. The apartment has become a real home. My paintings hang wherever I want them. My books fill shelves I chose myself. My kitchen smells like the foods I want to cook, not meals planned around someone else's preferences. Simple things, but they add up to something precious. Autonomy. Marcus and I have slowly rebuilt a relationship, but it's different now. He calls before visiting. He asks about my life instead of telling me how to live it. When Emma and David come to see me, It's because they want to spend time with their grandmother, not because their parents need childcare. The visits are shorter, but infinitely warmer. Sarah and I are polite to each other now, nothing more. I think she's relieved that the problem of my presence has been solved, even if not in the way she originally planned. Marcus tells me they're having marriage problems, struggling with the financial pressures they'd hoped my presence would alleviate. I feel sorry for them, but not sorry enough to sacrifice my peace of mind to help. The hardest part of this journey wasn't leaving. It was learning to stop feeling guilty for putting myself first. For 57 years, I'd been taught that a good mother, a good woman, puts everyone else's needs before her own. Learning to reject that programming to believe I deserve dignity and respect took months of therapy and countless conversations with Patricia and the other women in my support group. But the lesson was worth learning. I sleep peacefully now. I wake up excited about my day instead of anxious about what demands will be placed on me. I eat meals when I'm hungry, not when someone else's schedule dictates. These small freedoms add up to something revolutionary for someone who'd spent decades living according to other people's expectations. Last month, Marcus came to visit me alone. We sat in my kitchen drinking coffee and talking about his childhood, about the sacrifices I'd made that he was finally beginning to understand. He cried, something I hadn't seen him do since his father's funeral. He apologized not just for the immediate crisis that had driven me away, but for years of taking my love for granted. "I don't know how to make up for what we did to you," he said. "You can't make up for it," I told him. "But you can make sure you don't repeat it. You can teach Emma and David that loving someone means respecting their choices, not controlling their lives." He promised he would, and I believe him. Not because Marcus is perfect, but because losing me taught him something about the cost of taking family for granted. The children ask sometimes if I'll ever move back with them. I always tell them the same thing. Grandma loves you very much, but she loves her own house too. And that's okay, isn't it? People can love each other and still live in different places. They accept this easily, the way children do when adults are honest with them. It's only grown-ups who seem to think love requires sacrifice of self. Yesterday I got a call from a woman named Helen, whose daughter had moved her into an assisted living facility against her will. She'd gotten my number from the senior center and wanted to know if there was anything she could do. I invited her for coffee, and we spent 3 hours going over her options. She has more than she thinks she does. They always do. This is what I know now that I didn't know when I was folding clothes into that suitcase 2 years ago. It's never too late to choose yourself. It's never too late to demand respect from people who claim to love you. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do for your family is refuse to enable their selfishness. Marcus learned something from my leaving that he never would have learned from my staying. Emma and David are growing up understanding that their grandmother is a person with her own life and interests, not just someone who exists to serve their needs. Even Sarah, in her way, learned that manipulating vulnerable family members has consequences. But mostly I learned something about myself. I learned that the woman who raised a child alone, who worked multiple jobs, who sacrificed and struggled and survived, was still there inside the tired grandmother who'd been packing her bags in defeat. She'd just been buried under years of other people's expectations and demands. I packed my bags that day, thinking I was leaving everything behind. But what I found was that I was finally bringing myself home. Home to a life where I matter, where my choices count, where love doesn't require the surrender of dignity. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people who don't know how to value what you bring to their lives. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, that walking away teaches them to see you clearly for the first time. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where family love felt more like a burden than a blessing? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who might need to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories about finding strength in unexpected places. Remember, it's never too late to choose a life that honors who you really are. Thank you for listening to my journey, and may you always have the courage to choose yourself, when choosing yourself is what love really requires.